Okay, now we can get started. I can always trim from the beginning or the end, just not
I'm
the
with it.
middle of it. Cool. All right, so hey y'all, this is Dr. Cunningham, and welcome to Life Lessons with Dr. Cunningham, my YouTube channel. And today I have a very cool guest with me who is an author. He has a Master's of Science in English. He was a teacher for over a decade and is now an international business consultant. My literal brother married my sister,
Hold
Clyde
on.
Exavier. What's
What's
up,
going
Clyde?
on? Chilling, chilling, chilling. I'm loving the intro right now, making me feel like super prestigious, but it's cool. It's cool. Hello,
Yeah,
everybody who might be watching, all that good stuff.
yeah, and I'm so glad that you're a part of the channel. What I was sharing with Bro earlier is that I'm so glad that, we're going to be doing a lot more shows, including men in these conversations, because last season when we were doing shows, a lot of them were professional females. But you know what? Professional men have their voices and they need to be heard. And so we're making sure that the platform is set up to provide space for all of us and for us to have some real discussions. And this particular month, we are focusing on, for this particular recording, June as Men's Health Month. Now, if I'm able to share some statistics here, you all know that I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. And I want to make it clear that I don't just work with females. I like working with the men too, because sometimes when people think about families, they're thinking that it's just going to be the mom and the kids. No, dads matter. Like y'all matter. And also uncles and brothers and cousins, all of y'all matter. Grandparents, grandfathers. So, with consideration of mental health, which is another reason why I have Bro on here, because his book called Eight is awesome.
Oh,
The,
thank you.
the relevance of mental health, that there are 6 million men out of a population of about 150 million people in the United States that are affected by depression every year.
Okay.
And now the five major mental health concerns that men usually deal with are either depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
bipolar disorder, which you're going to hear more about in this book, psychosis and schizophrenia, or even eating disorders.
Mm.
Now, the reality of the situation is that men do not share as much as women do. That's usually based on social norms,
Right.
and expectations. So, if a man is going to go to therapy, then it's usually because something really serious happened before he's going to end up going to therapy. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't men that wouldn't go, and maybe we can address and discuss that even a little bit more with regards to the book.
Hmm.
Because maybe that can also be related to class, social class, and what's considered appropriate or acceptable or not within particular, circles that
Hmm.
people are in, of
Hmm.
whether they're able to discuss it. And even if we go into discussion, maybe, black men and how that socially, as far as addressing mental health. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back off because it's so I'm just excited about the conversation. And I'm just throwing all these just information and ideas, but I really would
Word.
like to be able to hear from Clyde and just to give you a chance to be able to share, first just how you doing, and then you can discuss the premise. Like, how you doing today? I didn't even ask you how you
I'm good,
doing.
Joe. I'm excellent. I can't complain. Regular day of work. Came back after chill with the kiddies over the night. You know what I mean? I'm chilling. And of course, your lovely, lovely sister. If she happens to
Yes,
watch this, I gotta say that so she doesn't kill me.
Miss
But
Fabulous.
facts. But yeah, nah, real rap. It was a cool day, just regular, working. Came home, did my thing, and I'm here. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good.
All right, I'm glad. I'm glad, bro. Yeah, 'cause we're gonna have a nice conversation. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but we'll just
Mhm.
allow it just to flow as long as it goes.
Yeah, I'm with it.
And
I
so,
am with it.
so if you would like to share, the premise of your book
Okay,
with
sure.
the
So
audience.
I'll get into it. So where do I start? The book eight, the premise behind it is basically there is the main character, the protagonist of the story. Um, he is trying, so he suffers from bipolar disorder. And he tasks himself with putting himself in eight different life or death situations, based off of an experience he has in the beginning of the story where um, he's in one of those depressive moods. He has a near-death experience, and as soon as that happens, right, he survives it, and right afterward, he feels like this natural euphoria that he never had before because he just survived something that was, almost catastrophic, right? And he never had experienced that before without, the use of like, drugs and other coping mechanisms for depression and things like that, or bipolar disorder rather. And he's like, whoa, this is a brand new feeling, and I want to see if I can like conquer my bipolar depression by deliberately, after the first one, putting himself in 7 more situations, life or death situations, to see if he could conquer his bipolar. Um, and so it's that accompanied with, just life in general, his upbringing, different relationships with people in his life, and trying to navigate this whole like, wild plan without anybody in his life finding out. So that's what we're looking at. And that's like the basic premise of the book.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a roller coaster ride, that the story itself, and it's quite engaging. Like the read is, and your writing ability is
Oh,
amazing. So
thank
I
you,
just want to
thank
make
you.
sure that I clearly say that, because literally reading this book, I was like, this should be a movie.
I appreciate it.
Like,
I do appreciate it.
he
Um,
just wrote a movie script. So if anybody that's watching, y'all know people who write
listen, man,
movies,
yo, you
or
gotta chill, man.
produce.
You got me out here.
All I'm
I
saying, only reason why I'm saying that, because really, once they read the story, they're gonna be like, this is like, because it's something that's
mean,
entertaining, but then it also can be so realistic. Meaning, like, there's a part of me that even wondered, like, how did you even come up with his name, like Dante? And as soon as I saw the name, even before I read the next line,
mhm,
where it was like, a nod to Dante's Inferno, and I was like, man, that was one of my books when I was in like
mhm,
AP English and in my
right,
junior high school,
right,
or a junior year of high school. And I was like, but it kind of helped to make sense with regards to like what the character was going to experience, or maybe how he viewed his life, or maybe almost like a
exactly.
foreshadowing of the parents. So
Hmm.
to speak more on it, because I don't want to speak for you. I just,
Got you, got you.
I thought it was interesting.
I appreciate it. Well, first and foremost, good looks for just showing me mad love, showing the book love. I definitely appreciate that. It's a process, as you know. I know you're an author yourself, so it's a process coming up with a book or just writing the book in general. But again, just thank you so much. I definitely appreciate that. Um, but first, all right, let's backtrack a little bit. So, like, for me as a reader, right, growing up as a kid, so my parents always wanted to like instill reading knowledge, the thirst and hunger for always acquiring knowledge, right? And I always want to be somebody, just if I'm being transparent, like I feel like the process of learning for me, I want it to continue to the day that I die. You know what I mean? So we're always going to be like
Awesome.
learning, growing, and evolving. If you choose to do so, right?
Yeah.
Um, so as somebody who liked to read since I was young, I did find like at first I found like it's really important, like the material you choose to read, because it's like people might recommend things or people might say, oh, you got to read this, da, da, da. But if it's not compelling, if it doesn't speak to you as a reader, you're gonna feel like, and there's a huge misconception that reading in general is boring for that reason, because people can't find material they like.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm the reason I'm saying this too is because you mentioned how it's like a movie. I always wanted to like write something compelling. I leave it all. Look, I'm talking about plot twists, red herrings. I leave you on a cliffhanger at the end of a bunch of different chapters for that reason. I want you to keep going, like, oh, what's gonna
Mhm.
happen next? And I feel like that keeps people engaged, and I always want to be like that kind of writer. So if you that's what you got from it, I'm happy. Making me feel good on the inside. I appreciate it. you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
You've earned the warm and fuzzy feelings on the
You feel
inside,
me? I
right? I'm just
appreciate that.
saying.
I'm just saying, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Um, but so now to continue on to the second part of the question. So what was the uh catalyst for me coming up with the story?
Mhm.
Um, so basically I had something similar happen to me in terms of the first life or death experience that Dante experienced in the book. Um, so without giving too much, uh the catalyst for Dante would happen to me in real life. It involved not, and again, I want people to read, so I'm not going to give too much. But basically, without going into super detail, it involved a car. I was almost in a car accident, and prior to the accident itself, while I'm driving, I was driving a long distance to visit someone. And sometimes you're in the car on a long drive by yourself, you get to think about life. And you know, I'll even backtrack. Okay. We're gonna talk. We're gonna be open and honest, right? So
Okay.
at the time, I was driving to at the time my current girlfriend's spot. Um, I'm
Oh,
in yeah.
Rachel's gonna watch this later.
Let's
Has she
hey,
already heard the story? Has
baby,
she
you
already?
already know. You know, she knows. She know already, right? She knows.
All right,
Um,
bro. Just want to make sure.
Word. So, all right. So if anybody who watching is unfamiliar with Connecticut, I live in a place called. Well, I grew up in a place called Stanford, and my girlfriend at the time lived in a place called Waterbury, which is about, I want to say, close to an hour away driving, right?
Yeah, that
And
is
to
about out. Yeah.
yeah, right. And to get there, you take Route 8, which is a really windy but scenic route with mountains and all that good stuff, right?
True.
So at the time, me and her weren't, let's say, for lack of a better term, we weren't on the best of terms, right? So
Oh.
I'm about to visit her,
Mm,
and I'm thinking about everything that's going on. And again, it's nothing like super dire, but people have their issues in relationships. It's not like anything
mm,
crazy. But
understood.
while I'm driving to go see her, I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm like, you know, I feel like I'm going to see her out of obligation rather than genuinely being happy to go up there
Mm,
right now. You know what I mean? And
I
I'm
hear
just
you.
thinking about like all the nonsense in the relationship. I'm like, da, da, da. This all these thought this entire thought process is going through my mind. And
Mm,
at the time, I had a lemon for a car. It was a trash car, but it was all mine. I paid for it. And long story short, while I'm driving in this windy scenic route, I almost get into a car accident. I'm
wow.
talking about 360, 720 spinning in the like on the highway.
Wow.
Luckily there was no other car. I don't know how that happened. It's by the grace of God, but there was no other
Yeah,
cars.
divine intervention.
Yeah, close to me. Um, I'm sitting here trying to get the car to straighten out. I'm hydroplaning because it just started raining. I'm hydroplaning, spinning out. I'm like, I'm gonna die, and
Jeez.
I don't want to die right now. So I'm in the car gathering myself. Um, Literally, it was like a scene in a movie. I'm literally screaming at the top of my lungs, like, "Yo, F it! You are not." I'm screaming, "F it! I'm not dying today. F all that." I'm not like I'm
Mm,
screaming this because I'm like I'm mentally trying to gather myself so I can try to calm down and try to assess the situation so I don't die.
mm,
So I finally calm myself, get my car into like to be steady after spinning out, pull over to the side of the road, hop out the car, take a few breaths, I'm hyperventilating. I'm like, bro, I literally just almost died. I'm like, okay, you cool? I'm talking to myself, bro, you good? I'm good. Hop in the car, continue on my route. And
mm,
while I'm continuing to go, like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, bro, you almost died.
mm,
But at this moment, and excuse my French, we talking right now, all the
mm,
bullshit in your life that you give importance to that means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of
mm,
things, all the minute nonsense that we think about and mull over in our minds means
mm.
absolutely nothing when you're thinking about, just being grateful to be alive.
True.
So with that feeling, I was like, oh, this is something strange, it's compelling, and I know I have to do something with it. So I was
Mm.
like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then eventually that turned into, okay, let me write a book. Like, how can I take that feeling, that premise, and kind of translate that to a book? And then with that kind of developed into the character and what you have before you. So,
You know what? That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. Like, what I'm wondering is if you could share a little bit more about, what you shared earlier, because I want to make sure that I highlight, that particular wisdom, which
hmm
is circumstances in life aren't as important when we juxtapose them to life itself.
hmm
Like, and so I'm wondering,
hmm
are there certain things that went through your mind while you were going through that particular situation? Besides just, like, did you have any sort of like flashes through your mind or certain things that were important
hmm
to you that you thought about during that time?
honestly, everything escaped my mind at that point. It was all about survival. Honestly speaking, it was
Mm,
all about survival. And like, to backtrack a little bit, what you said, like the way that I look at the way that I perceive things is I understand, like, when you're dealing with something and you're in the midst of something, it's the realest thing in the world. And I don't want to take it away from anybody who's dealing with anything, but like the way that for me personally, the way I reconcile with all this is like it's a moment in time. Like, yeah, it sucks right now, but nothing is constant. So,
Mhm.
you know, do whatever works for you in terms of like how you can cope in a positive way, because I know there's negative ways of coping, but
Mhm.
how can I cope in a positive way? Or understanding like, yeah, it sucks right now, but tomorrow's a new day, or or it might be a week from now, a month from now, even a year from now. It's not always going to be the same. And that's how I kind of like reconcile in my own personal life, dealing with like nonsense that you have to deal with. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, at that point, sis, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like the only thing that literally went through my mind is I'm not ready to die yet. I don't want to die. I'm not ready to die. I'm not gonna die. So
Mhm.
I'm saying, I'm screaming to myself, bro, calm your ass down and figure this out before you die. Like that's it. So
Now,
that's,
how old were you? How old were you? When that happened?
I was 20 or 21.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Now the
So
question is,
mhm.
did you end up going to the girlfriend's house
Oh,
after
yeah,
that
after
happened?
that, I kept going. Like, you feel me? I'm on the course. I'm like, yo, I'm already mostly there. Whatever. I'm just gonna go and
Oh
call it a wrap.
my god.
But now the funny
So
part
when you
is,
said call it a wrap, what does that mean?
no, no,
Does
no,
that
no,
mean you
like,
broke up with her when you got there?
nah, nah,
Like
nah.
I want to know if this sort of like near death experience shifted what happened between you and that girl. Like
I
what
can't,
happened after that?
I
Or
can't,
was it
nah.
like it was like, oh, I'm 21, YOLO, and then after that happened, you focused on
Nah,
what happened?
I can't with you. Nah, but no, it didn't change it. Well, okay, it definitely when during that time when I went to go visit her, like my perspective, I feel like I was a lot lighthearted, and I was like, you know what, all that other stuff, it is what it is. Who cares? Like, let's just enjoy the moment. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of reconciled with that. But yeah, it was just like, okay, it is what it is. I'm upset about this, but let's leave it there and let's move forward. So
All right, all right, okay. So and so you utilize that particular experience in order to essentially build upon an entire story for Dante.
mhm.
And so what I'm wondering is, are there other similarities or differences? And again, without necessarily telling the story about
Mhm.
Dante. And I'm not saying it has anything to do with like mental health, but just more so kind of like maybe temperament, way of being. I mean, because he's
Mhm.
quite coy and intelligent as well, Dante, from what
Mhm.
I, read in the book. So
Yeah.
similarities, differences.
With me per se, I think one of our similarities is just being introspective. I always like to, mull over things and try to look at things from like different points of view and perspectives, just in general. So I feel like he's really reflective in that aspect. Um, but I feel like honestly speaking, there's a lot more differences than similarities between us. And that was on purpose because I wanted to challenge myself when I was writing him
Mhm.
as a character. Um, and it helped me learn a little bit more just about, people, other people in general. So like, without giving too much away, Dante comes from like a super affluent background, very wealthy. He's white dude named Dante. I know like a lot of people at first they thought he was black. It's like, no, he mentions how he's white in the book too. So
Mhm.
affluent, white, and he has a mental health disorder, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm none of those things. I grew up very humble beginnings. I know but for anybody watching, the firstborn in the United States of two immigrant parents who became citizens after the fact. Um, grew
From
up in,
Haiti.
yep,
That's what
a
makes okay.
Zoe life, you
Zoe,
digs? You
Zola.
know what I mean? So again, so it's different because what I mean, it was a whole culture shock for them and getting acclimated to the States. But so it's that on top of growing up the majority of my life in housing projects. Even though, my parents on the island were very, very like they were affluent on the island, but coming here, it was a transition because it's a whole different country. Um, so that, and obviously I'm not Caucasian. But shout out to my white folks. You know what I mean? I rock with y'all. That and then, but the most interesting thing for me was, okay. So let me backtrack a little bit. It's like I always want to make my characters grounded in some kind of reality, and in writing this, I was thinking about the character. So I had this idea of he's gonna do this, put himself in these life or death situations. But one thing that I always do when I write, I ask myself this question: why would somebody care?
Mm,
That was my big thing, right? Because oh god, I'm thinking about this is hilarious. All right, I'm thinking back to one of my favorite teachers of all time, right?
mm.
One of my English teachers from high school. He was a huge fan of Catcher in the Rye, right? And the
Great book.
character Holden Caulfield. And me and him were super close, and he know I was into reading. He was like, Clyde, yo, I can't wait for you to read this growing up. It's one of my favorite books, blah, 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 right?
Mm,
And I'm going through it, and I understand, and personally I feel like for him, like it was when it came out for him, it was like new and innovative because I know like they mentioned there's cursing in the book, and that was like the whole thing. Like parents were like, "Oh, can we let our kids read this?" Right? And I'm coming at it. So at the time, I'm early teens, and he's a grown adult. I think he was in his 20s, whatever the case is. But I'm like, times evolve, times changes a lot more, like wild things and like a few curse words in a book, right? So I'm reading the story and I'm looking at this character, and the whole entire time, and I get where he's coming from, because the perception is some people feel like he was suffering from mental health issues. Some people were like,
mm,
oh, it's tuberculosis, whatever the case is, right? But he was dealing with some kind of trauma, and
mm,
writing about it and his experiences. But the way for me, I was looking at the character like, yo, like this dude is like soft, like what I mean. He's like, and I hate to say like that, and he's not soft because he suffers. He might be suffering from a mental disorder. He's soft. He was soft in my opinion, more so because of his perception of everyone else. Like he
mm,
came off to me as somebody that was super pretentious, super whiny, and
mm,
very judgy. Like everybody's a phony, everyone's a fake. Okay, then get away from those people and then discover who you are. That's how I looked at it.
mm,
Me and my
mm,
teacher at the time, like we had a whole in-depth like conversation about the character, and I was like, so I said that sort of say this, like when developing Dante, I didn't want him to be Holden Caulfield 2.0. I wanted
mm,
people to see him as a character and as a person, and understand why, or what are his motivations to do this. So part of it, so when I was exploring that, and I'm like, okay, why would somebody care that this dude is like pseudo trying to commit pseudo, I want to put that in quotes, trying to
mm,
commit
mm,
suicide. um a normal person would be like, okay, just stop doing it. But if adding that element of, okay, he has bipolar disorder, on top of him coming from that rich background where he feels like his parents have sheltered him because of that disorder, and he doesn't really have any autonomy for himself, and he wants to see something through, even though it's something like super out there. He wants that autonomy for himself to see how far he could take something and actually achieve and accomplish a goal he set out for himself without help from anyone
right,
else. So that's part of it. So I
mm,
was like, okay, people can relate. People can relate to, wanting that freedom. People can relate to, okay, he's suffering from a mental disorder, so that maybe that's what's compelling him to do this too. So I kind of want to ground it. I wanted to ground him in some kind of reality or some kind of aspect that people can understand and relate to. So hence why we did all that.
right,
Yeah.
right. So,
Mhm.
what I'm wondering though is if you don't mind
Mhm.
sharing, like from your perspective as a writer, and then also, it can also connect to your perception or your perspective
Mhm.
personally,
Mhm.
is what does it mean to be a man? What is manhood?
Hmm. Damn, that is a loaded question. What does it mean to be a man? God dang. Uh, my perception of what it is to be a man is taking care of what you have to take care of, responsibility as a grown man, responsibility, um, mastering yourself and your emotions, knowing who you are as a person, not necessarily knowing what you would do in a certain situation, but understand what you're not willing to do or what you're not willing to compromise. Um, I'm trying to think. For me, I always valued being, stoicism in terms of my
Mhm.
emotions, and of course, we all have them. And for me, the way that I look at it is, um, as men, it's okay to express yourself. It's okay to, be emotional. It's okay to let people know that I'm not okay. But
Mhm.
me personally, I'm very particular with who I relay that information to because I feel like, again, this is just me personally. It's okay for you to
Mhm.
cry, but not everybody. And this is a quote that I say to myself all the time. As a man, it's okay for you to cry, but not everybody is worthy of seeing your tears.
Mhm.
So that's just my personal philosophy. So it's like
Mhm.
never for me, it's like never leave things bottled in because it's stress, and stress is gonna kill you. If
Mhm.
if you're dealing with something and it's overwhelming and you need to do something about it, like if you trust somebody and you know that the things that you say or your actions are not going to be weaponized against you, and I know that a lot of men fear that in general, like the
Mhm.
weaponization of their emotions and their fears and all that, whether that's with friends, other males, or society in general, or like family, or even their spouse. I've heard a lot of
Mhm.
stories of that, like where somebody's trying to open up, but like how their emotions were received by the other person made them pull back.
Mhm.
So,
So is there something else that goes into determining who's worthy of being able to see your tears or to hear your heart? No, like how would you, if you had to teach another man,
mhm,
like this is what you look for in order to know that you're going to be safe with that person to share really what's going on, like what would you
mm,
say to them?
time is the biggest thing. I, just spending time
Mm.
with people, because in general, I feel like when you first get to know someone, regardless whoever it is, like you're meeting the representative. They're putting their best foot forward. Relationship, friendships, whatever the case is. But time, you know what I mean? That's the real test. So how treats you or deals with the situation that you're involved in. Um, from a negative aspect. Like, so if you're going through something, how do they treat you? If you're not able to do something, how do they help pick you up? Whatever the case is, or just learning that person too. Um, that's my gauge. For me, I personally, I have a lot of friends that I've had since childhood. So those are the people who like I'm the most comfortable with. I have a lot of close family members that I could talk and have conversations with. Um, but again, and that's a personal thing. I think it's for me just being trustworthy. And for me, like growing up in my environment, it's like you don't ever want to be too naive to circumstances because, and when you're coming from a social economic status or a background where there's a lot of like drugs, crime, things of that nature.
Mhm.
Being naive can turn you into a victim.
Mhm.
And for me personally, that's one thing that I fear. I don't ever want to be a victim. That terrifies me. So I'm very
Now, can I ask you this? Like, was that a particular narrative that was shared with you, even from your parents? Now, I didn't
Mhm,
necessarily think that we were going to go to this particular topic. At the
mhm,
same time, to consider the fact that you're first generation Haitian American,
mhm,
I wonder if that particular, factor plays a role, meaning even what your parents taught you because of going from Haiti and kind of the way things were and being
mhm,
accustomed to that particular culture, and then
mhm,
going to America, which is a completely different world, different way of life, new people.
mhm,
And so I'm wondering kind of, navigating not only, growing up in the hood, but then
mhm,
also being a first generation, you know, uh, uh, American of immigrant parents.
mhm. Well, I would say in Caribbean culture in general, like everybody's very blunt when it comes to expressing
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
So, in the States, and I feel like I have like a gauge of like the best of both worlds. So like generally speaking, right? In American culture for African Americans and Haitian Americans, Caribbean American, whatever it is, right? If you're born here, you understand that a lot of times you're sensitive to how people perceive what you're trying to convey, right? So you might be very cognizant of the messaging behind it. So instead of saying like I don't know, I'm trying to think of like something, an example of something where you might have to try like express it delicately. All right, let's say for example, you're cool with somebody and that person might they might have bad breath, right? The way that somebody who's privy to American culture might tackle it is like they might pull you to the side like, yo, bro or sis or hey friend, I just want to let you know real quick. And I mean they're whispering, they pull you to the side like, yeah, I was talking to you a little bit, and they might make a joke out of it, like, your breath is a little ripe right now. I got some mints, all right. You know what I mean?
The
Um,
American way.
the
Yeah.
American way, like you gotta, it's like, honey with the medicine. You feel me? Caribbean culture is the exact opposite. It's blunt as hell. They will make a joke out of it, like, oh my god, your
That's
breath stink,
facts.
like dude, go brush it, like, you know what I mean, like that. That's ask anybody, and not only Caribbean. I know like a lot of people who are directly from Africa. I know like a lot of my Nigerian friends that have like that in common too. So like whether you're Haitian, Jamaican, Trinidadian, Virgin Islands, Nigerian, any of like you know, any kind of like African, like that's the culture. It's very blunt. Like we're not sugarcoating nothing. No, go do this. Like you're bugging, or like, oh, you smell like you stink. Go take a shower. I mean, that's just how it is. But I would say in terms of that, like I think the part of me that came up, well, the part of me that feels like emotions are okay, but just be careful of when and who you choose to express them with. I think that was more so with my parents. Um, so that's what they always would say, like, it's okay, like you're a human being. As a man, you know, you don't your perception, you have to understand the perception that society has of men, right? And you don't ever want to come across as a weak man, because weak men are not respected and they're not seen as much as high regard as somebody who's perceived as more stoic or more in control of their emotions. Whether people agree or disagree with that, that's a whole different story. But that's what it was. So, but they're like, with that being said, you're still a human being. You're going to experience these things. So, if you need to vent, if you need to cry, if you need to do whatever you do, like one quote my mother used to have is like, "Yo, if you feel like you got to cry about something and you feel like you're not in a safe space to do so, go in the bathroom, go in a stall, cry your
That's
eyes
right.
out. You know what I mean? Once you're done,
You
gather
know,
yourself, dry your tears,
I
and
tell
go
you what,
out."
bro. I tell you what, bro. Like
Mhm,
seriously, the part of the reason why I'm glad the conversation is happening, because I feel like there are certain similarities, because our family is, yeah, as the on my father's side and my mother's
mhm,
side kind of southern roots, and so there's some similarities as far as, everybody's not worthy of being able to see your tears.
mhm,
If you need to go and cry, go to the bathroom and then make sure you dry your eyes, and then
mhm.
make sure if you have some Visine, put some Visine in it.
That's it.
It's not for when people get high, it's for tears. And
That's a
then,
fact.
and then to continue on. But at the same time, though, it's like, that those were the messages that we
Mhm,
received growing up as well. And so, not to say that there's exact similarities, because I don't know what it is to live the experience of being a man, but I
mhm,
feel like in some ways, Black women have been taught how to hold their emotions as well. And even though women, we tend to have more language,
mhm,
I would say more generally, and usually women are more likely to go meet with a therapist, or to even just speak to their friends about everyday stuff that they're dealing with. Guys tend to
mhm.
hold it more. But
Yeah.
at the same time, Black women, like, we have this sense of we have to be tough, and we can't necessarily share certain emotions. So it's okay to be able to be annoyed or frustrated or angry,
Mhm.
but we can't necessarily always say that we're hurt. And it depends upon who it is if we can express that. And so
Right,
there's a
right.
part of me that wonders if you were to share with gentlemen, like, you know, um, from your perspective,
Hmm.
like how do they even intro a conversation like that, whether it's with friends or who could they even go to, like as far as like a professional who
Hmm.
you feel like would be trustworthy,
Mm.
to be able to share with.
Yeah. Um, Shoot. For me, and again, I'm just speaking for
These are
myself.
these are deep questions, bro.
Yeah, man. Like I'm like, okay, like, geez, okay. But no, I like the questions though. Like,
Okay, cool.
okay, I'm thinking it's just like, okay, for me personally, um, it's trial and error. It's understanding that people that, and this is something that you're gonna have to reconcile with yourself too, that sometimes people that you perceive as being thorough and someone you can trust, unfortunately does something that is the opposite of that. And it's okay, it's gonna happen, it's bound to happen, but understand like that's not a reflection of everyone around you. That's a reflection of that one individual. So that's how I kind of reconcile those things. Um, so for me, in my friend group, I'm usually the one that people go to for advice because
Mhm.
I kind of I don't I think I don't know if fully mastered is there because I know for me I feel like I'm always growing and evolving and I'm learning myself every day.
That's
But
life.
I
Mhm.
feel personally I'm at a point where I have a good understanding of who I am. I'm not really searching for who I am. I think I know firmly what I stand for, who I am as a person.
Mhm.
And I had, a good amount of experience. I still have a lot more to go, but with that, a lot of my friends like they see how I handle situations and I'm usually the go-to for advice or like, bro, what do you think about this? And I don't know, it just happened like that. So and I was able to like
Mhm.
talk to a lot of my friends and in doing so, when we have conversations like this, I vent to them too, like, okay, so bro, like here's an example. Like I went through da 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 da, and at first it did whatever the case is. Like this is how I perceived it. This is how I experienced it,
Right.
and
Mhm.
this is what I did to like either overcome it or I'm still dealing with it. But this is how I lessen the pain of whatever situation that is,
Mhm.
or like I'm still going through it, and I have to like slowly but surely understand like, yeah, this sucks, and this is what it is for right now, and I'm dealing with it, but I'm waiting for that moment where it's the pain or whatever I'm going through is alleviated, and I know it's going to happen. It might not happen in when I wanted to in my projected timeline, but it's going to happen eventually. So I got to be patient for it. So and I would say in terms of therapists, like um I would say trial and error too, because I know like better like this isn't sponsored, this is not sponsored, but if you want to give us a check, we'll take a check. Um better BetterHelp is this, everyone's talking about that, online therapy. So like,
Mhm. Now,
you
if
know,
you're in Connecticut, you can meet with Dr. Cunningham, but you're
hey,
gonna it's self-pay though. I don't accept insurance. Just
okay, you know what I mean? So but
but
people like
BetterHelp is a great platform.
yeah, I was gonna say like, yeah, you gotta find therapists that you connect with. So people,
Mhm.
they tend to, gravitate towards therapists that share like a similar demographic to them, like whether
Mhm.
it's, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual identity, age, whatever,
Mhm.
social economic status, whatever the case is. So trial and error, find somebody who try them out, see if it works for you. If that's your bestie therapist, cool. If that's not the right person for you, move on to somebody else till you get the right person. That's what I would say.
That's right.
Um, I
I
haven't,
agree with that advice.
yeah. For me personally, I haven't done therapy in terms of like, uh, social emotional things per se. Therapy that I've done personally is marriage counseling with your lovely sister.
Mhm.
So the way because we always want to be good with each other. So we do this periodically, and we don't do this like when things are bad. We do it just as a regular practice, just
Understood.
as a check-in. You know what I mean? So it's like
Mhm.
so we do a marriage counsel session, like maybe ever so often, like okay, so this is what's going on in the marriage. How you feeling? Is this good? Is this working? What are we changing? How are we growing? Stuff like that. So we do it as a check-in. So it's not, and I want people to understand like therapy might not. It's not only for negative. It's not like only a negative connotation. Like you can use it as a tool at your disposal for whatever you want. So my wife and I use it for like check-ins on the marriage. and have like a third party that's objective. It's gonna be like, okay, I hear what Clyde's saying, so he's trying to convey this, or Rachel's saying this. That's my wife's name, by the way, for those who don't know.
Mhm.
She's trying to convey this. Clyde, did you ever think of it like this? Or Rachel, did you ever think like this? Like, oh, okay, you're objective. You don't have a dog in the fight. So, okay. Then we're able to like really interpret everyone's perspective and understanding in different situations like that. So that's the therapy that I'm used to. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you're making, because a lot of times people think that, especially within a particular culture, that the reason why a lot of Black people didn't see therapy is because they were like, we don't discuss things outside of the household, and
hmm
it usually was a way to protect the family from sharing anything negative. But
hmm
the reality is that therapy isn't just for addressing a concern, but
hmm
it's for self development.
right,
Which is the reason why there are people whom are coaches and therapists, because you could utilize it whether it's for a concern, because sometimes life happens,
right,
but then it also can be utilized to enhance oneself. So if one is, focusing on what's going on professionally or what's going on personally in order to consistently enhance themselves, they can meet with a therapist as well in order to focus forward and not look at life retrospectively in order to heal from something per se.
right.
And so I think that the point that you make is very valid. And I also just want to thank you again for being a part of the podcast. What I'm wondering
hmm
is at this particular point or juncture in the conversation is
hmm
just you know how how is it that you feel, because this is a question that I have to ask as like a family therapist,
hmm
how do you feel like your character navigated family life? And I know it's a separate question from what discussion
hmm
we've already been having, but just to get a sense of Dante as a brother, as a son, like I'm wondering about your
So
perspective
so
on
how did Dante navigate his family life as opposed to me,
it.
or?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
and I'm wondering about him specifically because
hmm
we're thinking about it from the perspective of if he has a diagnosis,
hmm
and even from the beginning of the book, without telling the whole story,
right,
it was very clear that he was almost juxtaposing his life to his brother.
hmm
I believe that was like in chapter one, where
right,
his brother always made a lot of friends, like he was the cool kid that, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden he feels like even though he
hmm
had friends, it was just different, and he was dealing with this like, so I'm wondering from your perspective, like
hmm
how did Dante kind of navigate his family life? Because the thing is that in my therapist mind,
hmm
I'm always thinking about it from the perspective of how family dynamics work with regards to the person who's considered the IP. So
mm,
if there's one person, which is literally the identified patient,
hmm
IP means identified patient. And so if there's an identified patient who's
hmm
sitting in the chair, and sometimes as a family therapist, we ask the family to join. It's
hmm
like, how does the family perceive that person who is the diagnosed one, so to speak,
mm. Okay, okay,
and how they
got you,
interact within their family?
got you. So I would say this, right? So in doing research, right? So one thing that I wanted to do when creating the character was like I wanted to make the character as authentic as possible, right? And I wanted to kind of tackle mental health disorders from a place of understanding.
Mhm.
Um and try to put it in a light where it's not like super stigmatized. So,
Mhm.
and in doing my research, right, and understanding bipolar disorder, like from what I gathered, it was people experiencing the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And I feel like anybody, regardless of mental health status, can understand experiencing those highs and those lows in life. It happens with everyone,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
um and I kind of like tried my best to explain it in the book a little bit too. So so the protagonist is talking to you as a reader and as an
Mhm.
audience, kind of like trying to explain mental illness or bipolar disorder specifically, right?
Right. Mhm.
And that was how I kind of reconciled in my mind as well. But it's like experiencing those for people who don't suffer from bipolar disorder, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows are usually determined by life events. So like you might be on cloud nine if you you know, you just got married or you got a promotion, whatever the case is. There's something that occurred in your life that causes that euphoric feeling that you're like, yes, I'm on. Yes, this is great. This is awesome. Um, and you know, adversely, there are certain things in your life that bring you down to the lowest. You might have got fired. You might have experienced a death in the family. You might have had a recent breakup. Those are the things that trigger a lot of like those moments of like utter sadness and depression in our life, right? And in doing my research with people who have bipolar disorder, it's like imagine experiencing those things just randomly. There's nothing that
Mhm.
triggered these things. There's nothing that was the catalyst for these emotions. It just
Mhm.
you wake up one day and you feel like this is the greatest day of my life, or you wake up one day and you feel a pain of like losing a loved one. And for me, I was like, God damn, like that is,
Mhm.
and I could empathize. Like I can't fully relate because I don't have it, but like
Mhm.
if I'm really trying to empathize with somebody, like, and see, like, just experiencing those things in life being triggered by outside events, I'm like, God damn, like, imagine going through that just randomly, and I don't know why. It's just that's the way my brain works. And I'm like, bro, that is a lot to deal with. So,
Intense.
right. So that's the first part. And then I feel like part of me being a teacher, and working with kids from all different you know cognitive abilities kind of help
Mhm.
like shape my perception of how some people tend to deal and navigate with that, right? So
Mhm.
and having former students that had not getting too deep IEPs or mental health disorders, whatever the case is, you have some family members who you have some families that'll um you know, they strive to make sure that that child is still acclimated with everyone else and you know lives for lack of a better term, quote unquote, you know, have a normal experience. So
Mhm.
their issue or you know their condition is not is not a reason for them to be treated differently.
Mhm.
And then on the other side you have I've had um you know families where they have a child who has some kind of condition, and that turns into I have to protect them, but protection turns to being a tiger parent or coddling or being so afraid that your child who has this condition won't be able to navigate by themselves that you smother them. So
Mhm.
I've seen
Helicopter parenting, yeah.
exactly. I've seen
Mhm.
both kind of spectrums. So just with that, I put Dante in the latter where his parents allow him to do things, but a lot of the things that he's experienced are sheltered by his parents, and they use their you know their wealth and their connections to shelter Dante as much as possible.
Mhm.
So that's kind of part of the reason why he wants to veer out and experience life for himself with with you know the whole eight experiment. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, and the thing is that that story is so realistic,
Mhm.
and that's the reason why I thought it was, great and to be able to share that because there's so many different dynamics, even with regards to the family. And again, I don't want to necessarily read into it too much and do like, my own sort of like diagnostic formulation of his
Mhm.
family. At the same time, this is also a great book for professors who are going to be teaching about diagnosing
Right.
because it's very relevant with regard to bipolar. So the universities that in Connecticut that we're aware of, y'all know who you are because I've worked with
Mm,
many of y'all in Connecticut, okay, and even in Pennsylvania. Well, all I'm saying is,
mhm,
and New Hampshire. But at the same time, what I'm saying essentially is that the book is well written, and you could tell
thank you.
that you thought it through and that you really did your research. And now I know why you're asking me all those questions at certain points because I was like, bro,
Yep,
at
yep,
one point you asked me
absolutely,
those questions.
absolutely. All right. So inside scoop to anybody who's watching, I have Dante um have you know interactions with a therapist of his own, and I'm not gonna give too much
Mhm.
of that. But since sis is, somebody I could tap for like, firsthand knowledge of what it
No,
means to be a therapist.
clarify what tap means because you were my
Oh,
sister. So clarify
oh
what
my
tap
God,
means, bro.
I can't. Yo, get your mind out. Yo, get your mind right.
No, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that anybody else is
No,
not fully
but
thinking that. No, no,
I
he ain't
can't.
never tapped
I
this. Just
can't.
so y'all know,
I
okay? That
can't.
didn't happen.
Get your life. Get your life. Nah, we're siblings. Chill, chill. We siblings for anybody
Exactly,
watching.
exactly.
No, but what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
we don't
we're
do incest.
oh
I
my
never
God,
would.
I can't. I can't. But nah, what I'm saying is, yeah, so I just wanted to like really kind of delve into your expertise as a therapist yourself. And I remember before I started writing or while I was developing, I asked you certain questions like, okay, so when you meet and not going in specific, I was like in general. So um, when you're meeting with a client, like what are like some of the practices? What are some things that you're not allowed to divulge, or like what would happen in this situation if a client did this? What would be the professional way to like react to this, or how would you navigate this? So you kind of gave me a good perspective of like what an actual clinician would do in certain circumstances, and I kind of translated that to the book. I know what you're talking. I know you know exactly what you're talking.
So,
What I'm talking
bro,
about.
just consider it pro bono. But next time, I'm gonna ask for my percentage, just so
Listen,
you
man,
know.
listen. We have to, talk to our immediate resources, and I use you as a
Hey,
resource, and I
hey, that's
appreciate the
real.
wealth of knowledge. You know
That's
what I mean?
real. Don't understood, but I recognize we're all family, so we support each other. I supported your project, and I know that there are times where you have shared, books that I have written and authored. So it's
Mhm.
all love. Like literally, our family. I'm so grateful for because all of us are doing well in our own right, but then also are very creative. It's like we have our degrees and we can be very professional, but then
Mhm.
we're also very grounded and just down to earth people and could just have like I
Try to
love
be.
code switching conversations. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
I
And
can't.
also just real talk. Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm thankful that we were able to have this conversation. And frankly, this is an ongoing conversation that could occur because there are could be men who need the encouragement
Mhm.
to know that it's okay to be able to share what's going on, internally.
Yeah.
And also even just the idea of being able to share what's on their heart and mind
Mhm.
can reduce the likelihood of men committing suicide because the ones
Absolutely.
who actually attempt and succeed the most are men
Our men. Yep.
because they
Absolutely.
usually take the most direct and volatile approach
Yeah.
because number one, like literally they've thought it through, but then also
Mhm.
number two, they usually don't tell anyone, which means that they're just maintaining those particular secrets in their mind
Mhm.
that usually leads to following through with it. And
Yeah.
so it more likely to use like guns and
Yep.
jumping off of a building because they know it's 100% going to happen that they're going to lose
Exactly.
their life.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And
I read a little bit about that too. So like, yeah, uh, generally speaking, a lot of times they say that women's attempts are cries for help or like reaching out. Um, so like
Mhm.
they might tend to do something like unfortunately like try to slit their wrist or whatever the case is, as opposed to like you said like a lot of men when they're at that point, it's like they want to do something definite because they already made the decision. Um, but yeah, to piggyback off what you said, like if I can encourage any guys out there that are dealing with stuff, because you don't have to necessarily have a condition to deal with stuff. We all deal with something, right?
Mhm.
We all have, things that are going on in our lives that people aren't privy to. And if they're detrimental, if they're harming you, or if they make you feel less than, it's 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 important to figure out what works for you as a person to make sure you get through it. Because personally, I suicide is just it's not the answer. Like and I get it. Like I said earlier, I get it. When you're in the midst of something that's the worst thing in your life, it feels like every second is a year. And I get it. And I understand, like, and especially as men too, like generally speaking, we're taught, that, don't show your emotions. And I know that there is a push nowadays society like in society for us to be more emotional. And if I'm gonna be just, honest and transparent, personally, I feel like it's more of a talking point than an actual reality. I feel like a lot of people are
Mhm.
saying that now because it sounds good on paper, but when men actually try or when men do that, they're still perceived as weak. And it's not only by other
Mhm.
men, it's by women as well too. That's just my personal perception. So with that being said, there's not really a safe space for men to communicate that. So I feel like it's important for you just to um, position yourself and be at a point where you do what's best for you as a person. So if it's confiding in somebody you feel like you can trust that's in your personal life, do so. If it's, a therapist, do so. And, figure it out and, work within your budget and now that like I know you mentioned if you're Connecticut, people can come to you for, family counseling. If you live in an area, where that's not readily available in your community, there's online resources, there's a bunch of different things. So just understand like whatever you're dealing with, it's not the end all be all. And I feel like, you can always seek help for something or seek some kind of alternative than, what you feel is, something that's never ending. And I take it back to like, all right, here's one thing. Me and some of my boys talked about this too. It's like some of the things that you give credence to mean absolutely nothing. Do you remember in high school what you used to think that was like the most important thing in the world? Like the
Mm,
dumbest things, like the dumbest social like interactions, whatever the case is in high school. You're like, this is my world is over because da 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 da. Like, you know what I mean? This is high school.
mhm,
And now as an adult far removed from that, it's like you
mhm,
look back like, bro, I really gave that so much importance when it was like so minute in like the grand scheme of things. And I want
right.
people to understand that even as an adult, what you're going through is absolutely real. I'm not going to take it away from anybody, but it's a moment in time. Nothing is constant, whether it's good or bad. Things change, things always develop, adapt, whatever the case is. So if you're in a season where you're going through some negative stuff in your life, seek help and understand it's not always going to be like that. The time frame might suck. I definitely say that. The time frame might suck. It might be longer than you hope, expected, or want, but understand it will get better with time. So, it's just that's one thing I want to encourage the guys out there to do and understand and seek help. So that's what I would say. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Because it is important for guys to know that they can be supported, and also that there are people who genuinely care about the support that they provide.
Yeah.
Like I really heard what you said, and it's something that kind of jarred me a little bit, which was literally for you to say that it's something that looks good or sounds good on paper, especially because of being in a culture or a time now where people have to really be politically correct.
Mhm.
And so for guys to and also to really focus on not being gender biased
Mhm.
because there's so much going on regarding gender. And so, knowing and understanding that guys had been socialized to, not really express their emotions as much. And so now they're wanting to shift it in order to be able to create a space or to
Mhm.
say that there's a safe space for guys to be able to really emote. But the
Yeah.
reality is that we don't want it to just to be on paper. We want it to be the reality of what people experience or what men experience,
Right.
which is safety and to know that they're not going to be judged for being honest about where they are. And so
Yeah.
my hope is that the clinicians who watch this, and also for those who are either mothers, girlfriends, wives,
Mhm.
the girl that's the bestie to the guys, because again, I grew up around a lot of guys, played sports with them and stuff. So I tended to have more guy friends than I did female friends growing up.
Mhm.
And so, it's important for guys to know that they have someone that they can trust, not only with what they share, but that they're not going to be judged when they
Right.
say what they say.
Right. And yo, I'll give you an example too. Like I'm talking about this is not personally, but um a first hand account from a friend of mine. He like stuff like again, it's encouraged, but it's like I had a friend of mine who had a friend of his who I wasn't close to, but a friend of his passed away, whatever the case is. And, he confided in his girlfriend because it was like the anniversary of his friend's passing.
Mhm.
And it's like he was like, bro, her reaction, like she just seemed so uninterested, and like she looked at him funny, like, yo, are you about to cry? It's like, bro, he's a human being. Like his
Yeah.
friend died. Like, you know what I mean? You can't empathize.
Mhm.
So sometimes, and I'm not, and it's not a slight at women as a whole or anything. I don't want that to be the perception, but understand everybody in everyone's life. Like it's really important. to understand like how what we do and what we say affects other people.
Yeah.
Excuse for
My
anybody
niece
watching.
joining.
Yes, it looks like, me, my daughter wants to say hi. You okay, baby? Okay. Can you go with mommy real quick? Because daddy's still on this call. Okay. I'll talk to you in a little bit, all right, baby? Okay. Thank you, sweetie. Um, that was my baby, y'all. It's my baby.
Yeah, duty calls,
Yeah,
right?
right. Hey, dad life, it never stops.
Yeah, that
But
dad life. Mhm.
yeah, I was just like, yeah, so it's just like I want everyone to understand, like, yo, how you react to somebody, telling you their trauma is important too. Because then you know, if you do it in a negative fashion, whatever the case is, their guard is gonna be absolutely up. So you don't know what you stop that person from doing in the future, and now that person might be holding that in, and that could be any kind of trauma. So that's really important too. And like I've heard people say like there's a misconception that we don't have like as men that we don't you guys don't have emotions, you guys don't feel. It's like yo, we're human beings. We might not.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like we might not outwardly express it as much as you do, but just because we don't express it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I just want people to
Well,
be
look at
mindful of things like
I
that
don't
too.
I don't want to sound like I'm judging someone, but that just
Mhm.
sounded like a quite ignorant statement that that person made. But I don't want to digress because I'm not a judgmental person. At the same time, like I was like, wow, for
You
real.
know, there's a lot of things, that as men, we just and again, it's not I'm not saying it's better or worse, I'm just saying it's different. So like, it's just
Mhm.
par for the course of, being this gender. So it is what it is. But
Mhm.
I just want to, reinforce that for everybody. There's still tools out there for you. Whatever you need, just go seek those things out. And trial
Right.
and error. It's not going to be 100% all the time. You might come across a therapist that's not your fit. You might try to divulge some information to somebody that you trust, and they turn out to be somebody that you can't. And yeah, it sucks. And yeah, you might be hurt, but that shouldn't negate you from seeking out, something that will help you eventually in the long run. So that's my perspective on it, though.
Right.
Mm.
And I will even say that if there's a client who has ever met with me, and if they didn't feel like it was a great fit, I will always tell them to meet with multiple therapists until they find someone that they connect with.
Mhm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be because something was ever done inappropriately. It could just mean that, culturally speaking,
Right.
how someone presents themselves. However, what's most important is, and I
Mhm.
know this from research and also just my own experiences, is that when people meet with a therapist that they connect with and they're able to create a therapeutic alliance, they
Mhm.
have better outcomes.
Right.
They literally, therapy is more effective for them when they're
Mhm.
meeting with someone that they feel like they can connect with,
Right.
which is the reason why it's important to meet with someone. So shop for therapists like you would shop for a pair of shoes, and that's okay. That's all I'm
That's what it is.
Or
So
if
you
it's a
find that right
dude,
fit.
that likes it for real, exactly. Like, perfect pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? Like
That's
you
it.
got to make sure you keep shopping until you find the correct pair.
Facts.
And so, it's completely okay to do so. And my hope is that from hearing from my brother, hearing about the book 8, and
Mhm.
hearing from hopefully, one of your cool and trusted therapists of the time in
Hey.
Connecticut.
Yeah, let them know. Let them know. Shameless plug, though. Do what you got to do. You know what I mean?
That
Shameless
you
plug.
all would be okay with meeting with their with clinicians, because honestly recently, bro, like especially since COVID, there's a
Mhm.
lot more men groups and gentlemen that have been seeking therapy that have even contacted me, and I'm like, I'm grateful. I'm not a male, so I don't know what the
Mhm.
male experience is. At the same time, if they're feeling comfortable with meeting with someone in particular that literally that they could trust, and they
Mhm.
feel like can guide them, with regards to wisdom and skill set, then I'm here for it, because it's important to be able to see men whole as well, because from my perspective, and we know that we have our belief system, but men really are the leads of their families.
Mhm.
And not to necessarily to put all the pressure on the man to have to always be it's not about being the hero, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, too, when, decisions are made, of course, I like, egalitarianism. I always talk about being like, like a feminist, but I'm not anti-man. It's a matter of
Mhm.
just equality between men and women. But
Mhm.
at the same time, it's like, at the end of the day, as being a Christian woman, we say, Adam was in the garden first. Like, now
Mhm.
Eve was there as a rib, but she didn't
Right,
have the vocal cords until, God pulled the rib from his side. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Now, it
And
doesn't mean that a woman doesn't have a voice, but at the same time, it's still to make sure to honor and respect men, because within the Black culture, I mean, well, I can't speak for all families, so I could say that there's some families that have patriarchs and there's some families that have matriarchs.
mhm.
But we always hear about Big Mama. I ain't never heard about a Big Papa, except for
Except for the
except for
two,
Notorious
you feel me?
B.I.G.
Baby missed out. I feel you. I completely co-sign. I do. I would say too, like, yeah, like, I don't know, my percent. I know we're kind of like digressing a little bit, but yeah, my perception of that is like, if you're a decent man, you know what I mean, with a family, you always in the back of your mind are trying to do everything in your power to make sure that your wife and your kids are okay. And you know, with life, there's ebbs and flows and all that good stuff. So a lot of times, when you're mulling over different things, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, as men. That's what we do. Like, like our whole, you reach mature men, because I can't speak for all men, but mature men, at a certain point, you reach a level where that's the most important thing to you. And you want, like, so again, like I said, things that come with that are just making sure, like, am I doing this right? Or am I able to take care of this? Am I able to, not only from a financial point, but like mental, physical, spiritual, coach, whatever aspect you're trying to, hold your family down from. It's a lot of things that we kind of mull over and think about a lot of times, that we kind of keep to ourselves, because we want to make sure, like, the people that we care about and the people that we love are okay. And that's a lot of added pressure sometimes, especially when you're new to it. And me myself being fairly new to this whole thing, I'm like, I'm still learning every single day. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what that means. All right. Or, oh, you could do that better, bro. Okay. All right, but you know what I mean? So um
And for men to know that it's okay for them to be able to have compassion toward themselves as well,
yeah,
because
yeah.
society can place that pressure again. And even when saying that the man is the lead, that's the reason why I kind of started using those caveats, so that
Mhm,
a man knows that when he's in a healthy environment, and I'm not trying to necessarily go into my book, but
mhm,
at the same time,
yeah,
for them to know that they have their village, that they have those who are supporting them,
right.
and aren't going to leave them at a space where they feel like they have to handle it alone.
Mhm,
Because I have this sense that sometimes men do feel isolated, even though they are surrounded by other people. But it's
mhm,
important for them to know, not only verbally, but through action, that they really are being supported.
right. And it's funny, I
Now,
had a
am I off? Is that a valid point or no?
No, I think it's a valid point. I had a conversation actually today with somebody I'm really close with, a female friend of mine. We were talking about this too. She was talking about how her spouse isn't as expressive as she would like him to be, right?
Mm,
And she's like I said, she's one of my homegirls, and I'm like, sis, you have to understand too, from our perspective as men, sometimes, like, I know I'm guilty of this all the time too, right? I never want to be that person who burdens other people with my issues.
mm,
So, like,
mm,
that's why I'm very particular with who I talk to certain things about. And I don't ever want to be perceived as somebody who can't handle themselves. Again, I think it goes back to that whole me not wanting to be a victim or perceived as one.
mm. Right.
Oh yeah, and I don't think I ever answered that part of your question too. That stemmed more so from my environment growing up. I saw that the people who were naive, and just, like, unaware, or like not, privy to the culture around them, were usually taken advantage of and became victims.
Mm,
And seeing that firsthand kind of terrifying. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Like, I'm talking about wild stuff, like, oh, like, you're perceived as soft. Oh, we're gonna rob him. And I've literally seen people get robbed at gunpoint in front of me as a little kid, because they thought so and so was
wow. Mm,
soft. Um, or like, I seen, and what I mean, I'm good. It's like no PTSD or anything,
I
but
hear you.
those things stick with you. It's like, oh, okay.
Understood.
Like, I remember, like, even something that, a scene that stays in my mind. I remember vividly, um like, four dudes surrounded a car, and they're literally punching out the windows of the car, screaming at somebody who's inside the car, talking about, give me my ish, like, because they thought homie was soft. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Mm,
whoa, that could never be me. I'd rather listen. I'm sorry. I'd rather
mm,
wild out before I let somebody do that. You know what I mean? And again, it might be
mm.
a defense mechanism or being honest, whatever the case is. But
No, but
sometimes,
that's a very real point.
yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is very real because even growing up, over in Bridgeport, there were guys that I recall being a part of gangs just to
Hmm.
make sure that they always had a group of people that had their back. Like
Right.
I saw my first gun at school in fifth grade. I was chilling, literally chilling in class. We were doing math, and I saw Michael. He was a
Yeah.
fine Puerto Rican. He
Listen,
was a
don't
fine
put his
Puerto
name out
Rican.
there. He might be
I'm
watching. You
just
know
saying
what
his. I'm just saying his first name. I'm not gonna say his full government, okay?
I mean?
But he was. I thought he was so adorable. Like he literally, he had these big brown eyes, and he was smaller than me, like literally smaller
Hmm.
and shorter. I mean, I was thick at fifth grade. I'm not
Hmm.
gonna go through like my puberty stages, but I was literally already at beyond the start of puberty by the time I was 10. But what it boils down to is that I was sitting next to him in class, and he was over there, I guess, trying to act like he was, the man in the
Hmm.
class. And he just finished math, and we had just finished it. And I looked over and I'm like, hey, Michael, blah, blah. We just having our little discussion. And he's
Hmm.
like, I got something to show you. And he started pulling up his shirt. I was like, hold on, what you talking about? You about to show me? And then he pulls out a gun. Literally,
Hmm.
he had it looked like it was maybe a 22.
Oh wow. Okay.
I went home and told my dad because I
Hmm.
was like, this boy just showed me a gun at school, Dad. Like, what's going on? But he was a part of the gang. I'm not gonna say the name, but
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
was
Let's keep that in the
Hispanic.
wraps. I mean, statute of
Yeah, I'm
limitations
not
on
gonna
whatever. You
say.
know what
Yeah.
I mean?
But at the end of the day, what ended up happening was that was like a memory I always recall, and it helped
Mm,
me to really understand that guys really did have to express this particular persona. And the
mm,
reality is that even though that was something that kind of was caused me to pause or to hesitate for a moment.
mm,
The reality is that the majority of girls would respond like, oh my gosh, because Michael had a gun. Like
mm,
it was almost like a sense of him being manly enough to be able to protect, and he's like
mm.
he's got that G status.
Right.
So like it was also perpetuated, by girls for him to be that way while he
Mm,
was also trying to protect what he thought was manhood,
right.
and
Right.
also a sense of family.
Mm.
You know,
And
um,
I would say too, yeah, is that perception of being the bad boy, the tough guy. So a lot of sometimes
mhm.
we do that because it's attractive to the opposite sex, and of course we want women. So it's like, okay, if some people take that and like, oh, okay, if I act a certain way, if even if that's not who they are as a person, it's like if I pretend to be this way, I'm gonna attract the opposite sex. So it's just it's part of understanding who you are as a person too. And I'm not saying for dudes to be out here and not defend themselves or be cowards or anything, but you don't have to overly be a gangster to prove your manhood. I feel like for me, just manhood is about taking care of what you gotta take care of, and of course defend yourself when necessary and handle your business how you have to handle your business. But don't be that person that puffs out his chest or go seeking issues where you don't have to just to prove something to who or what. You know what I mean? Because the consequences of that can be dire, whether it's prison for you, death for you, whatever affecting your family, whatever the case is. So I'd say that too. Um, but to backtrack.
And
Oh,
honestly, at this age too, women would know if a man is secure in his manhood, depending on how
mm,
he moves. And so for a man to be searching for a reason to express his manhood, perfect example, where I live is literally between a bar and a nice restaurant that has
mhm,
like a wine bar. And
mhm,
I cannot tell you how many nights, especially on the weekends, where I
mhm.
hear a man screaming, talking about meet me outside because I'm about to tell you about yourself and I'm about to
Mhm.
show you that and I'm just like, why is he doing all of that? Like he's waking up the entire neighborhood to try to prove a point when
Right.
the reality is that number one, he has some liquid courage in him to say something he probably would have never said.
Mhm.
And then two, for him to feel as though he needs to in order to defend whatever may have occurred while they were in the bar.
Right.
Now, and so to create a dynamic that leads to
Mhm.
an unnecessary fight can tell you where his maturity level is. And again, I'm not anti men.
Mhm.
I think that guys bring great balance, because I can't imagine a world with just estrogen. I can't imagine. A world with testosterone is marvelous to me. At the same time, what I'm
Mhm.
saying
Mhm.
is that a man who is aware of his testosterone and not necessarily trying to superimpose his testosterone onto someone else,
Right.
especially unwarranted,
Right.
is marvelous as well.
And that's one thing. It's all about the necessity of things too, because you have to understand, like, all right, so with men, and just perception for anybody who's curious, right? The way that we interact with each other, we know that there's always uh a propensity for violence. There's always a possibility of violence between men. You know what I mean? So that's why we tread lightly on how we talk to each other or what we do, because we know certain things, because of by nature, we're not, very we don't communicate on the same level that women do. So
But
where
sometimes y'all fight for fun. Like, I don't understand that. That's the
I
part I
mean,
don't understand. Well,
I mean,
y'all just fought and then y'all just act like besties like 10 seconds later. Like, that's
oh
the
well,
part.
that's part of being a dude too. Like, I mean, like, let's keep it a being. I'll be honest too. Like, growing up, I fist fought some of my friends but that's the younger thing too, because it's like you don't have the words to express how certain things make you feel when you're growing up as a young boy sometimes, right?
Mhm.
So instead of you sitting there having a conversation or you understanding like, oh, you did this and it made me feel this kind of way. No, you made me angry. We're gonna fight. We fight, we punch each other. Like, I mean, we punch each other until we're satisfied. And then it's like, okay, are you good? Yep. Are you good? Yep. Okay, we're besties now. That's how it is. It's weird,
Yeah,
but
what I will say is
it's
that
life.
it's twofold. One, I'm not condoning guys just going to fight,
Mhm.
because there are some guys that'll just that don't fight anymore. Youth
Oh
are
yeah,
like carrying weapons and stuff.
it's a different time now.
It's a
Now
different day and age.
everybody.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you know that you have a friend and you guys, guys that are friends, they do kind of like, wrestle and, stuff like that, like what they consider horseplay. Like, is I see it all the time, even during the summertime when they're at the pool. Like, why is the one guy dunking the other guy under the water? Of course, making sure he knows how to swim. Because that's like the female side of me that's like, we want to make sure that you guys are okay, still remain alive and well. But we know y'all are being guys. But if a guy doesn't act that way, it's okay too. Now, I don't know if I did something to my headset, because I can't hear you right now.
Testing one,
Hello?
two, 1, 2.
Now I can hear you. Okay.
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
Did you
I'm
mute
here.
yourself?
Not at all. I heard you perfectly the entire time.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah,
Okay, please
yeah.
continue on.
But
This ended up being a long conversation, but
yeah,
it's
nah,
been
I'm
a
with it. I'm
very
with it.
great conversation, right?
Nah, and I appreciate it too. What was the last point that we were saying? Oh yeah, so like I was saying, like just yeah, really consider the necessity and gravity of what you're gonna do, and know the reason for it. Don't engage in violence just for the sake of violence because you're trying to prove a point. That should be your last resort. That should be in defense of like your loved ones, your family, yourself. You know what I mean? Don't just wild out for no reasons. What I would say too.
Or
A
call the
lesson.
police.
Sure, if that's the route that you would like to take, absolutely. I don't know if personally that's my take, but it's each their own. I don't judge anybody. You know what I mean?
I'm just giving different cultural responses so that
Exactly,
we.
and that is absolutely fine.
That's the PC way for me to say it. Y'all know
Right.
if you from Bridgeport and Stanford and Harvard and Waterbury, y'all know what I'm saying.
Right, right, right. So, but yo, listen, hey, you know what? And I'll be completely transparent too. Like sometimes, if you would just call the cops, that would save a lot of trouble. You know what I mean? I'm being honest,
Thank
right?
you.
Right. And I
It
know it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. It's an upbringing thing. It's
is.
like I don't know if I want to do all that. And what I mean, we're gonna digress a little bit, but with the recent activities within the last couple of years of how we've been treated by law enforcement, you have to
Mhm.
take that consideration how people perceive
I
the
hear you.
people who are tasked with helping us as well. But that's a whole another story. But let me not digress.
But we
Um,
still have family and friends who also wear the blue uniform, so we love them.
Right. So, and again, it's the luck of the draw. If you know what I mean, if you know somebody who's good at their profession that takes it and does it in a way that's conducive to helping the community, that's awesome. And we're fortunate to know a few people who do that. But then you run the risk. I feel like there's a fear of you run the risk of coming across that good old boy. You know what I mean? You know
Mhm.
the far
They
right
do
that
exist.
yeah
Well, we'll say that that particular perspective predated their badge,
yeah
which
yeah
is the reason why, I mean, and this is a completely separate conversation. We're going to have to do another taping completely because there's so many different topics that we're going to address. But honestly, if I'm able to just share, it's kind of like my opinion regarding that, which is the reason why I believe that there's certain professions where people should be required to be assessed,
absolutely
not only for mental health reasons, but also regarding their own cultural biases, whether they're implicit or explicit biases.
mm,
Because like being a police officer is one. I think the president and everybody that's in government. I think therapists, all of us, people that are medical, because
right
even the reason why certain treatment is provided or not can also be related to implicit or explicit biases.
right
And so and also depending upon mental health, because again, June has a lot of different focuses, but June is also PTSD month. And there's
mm,
so many different providers or people like, parents, clergy that are dealing with secondary traumatic stress and don't even know it. Like, but if they met with a therapist regularly, or at least was assessed like every 6 months, and they would be required to know what's going on
mm,
mentally and emotionally, physiologically, spiritually,
right
and
right
relationally. I mean, so, but again, there's so many conversations, bro. Like, it's always nice having conversations with you because it's like
and
it
vice
always
versa
goes in
we
depth and it would
right
go on forever. But at the
right
end of the day, though, you also are a dad that's constantly on duty, and so I want to make sure I also respect your time as a father and also as a husband, because I'm sure my sister wants to see you. And so, what I'm going to do
Mhm.
is to say we'll end it here for now. At the
Okay,
same
cool.
time, maybe we'll also be able to discuss another topic another day. So,
Cool.
thank you so much, sincerely, for being a part of Life Lessons with Dr. Cunningham.
Appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed the
No,
conversation.
I loved it. I loved it. And I want to say to you, thank you for, yeah, just asking me to join, be a part. This was fun. I liked it. You know what I mean? And
Awesome.
for anybody watching, I hope, you enjoyed it as well too. Yeah, yeah, gained a perspective or whatever the case is. But, I dig it. So we good. We good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, bro. And audience, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, you all have a great one.
All right. Peace.